the soundtrack of your life's journey. Kingfisher FM.
Joining us from Risk Free Solutions, it's a great opportunity to welcome Vernon and his team. It's that time.
Good day. You are tuned to Your Financial Journey, where planning matters. Brought to you by Risk Free Solutions, an accredited Old Mutual Agency franchise, with Vernon DeVos and Ethan Black. The show that helps you make quality decisions and thrive. Unpack your future and make it better. Every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. right here on 107.5 FM.
Vernon, lovely to have you in studio with us again on a little bit of a rainy afternoon. Let's hope it comes down.
Yes, great to be here. Thanks, Ethan.
Special guest on the line all the way from Kimberley, is it?
All the way from Kimberley. In fact, she was doing such a great job. She actually started singing for us, Ethan. I don't know if she wants to maybe do that song. Pearl, do you want to do that song?
No, I don't.
Yeah, no, Pearl's all the way in Kimberley. She's in our Kimberley office. She's one of our planners down there, and she's been with me a while, and she's been in the industry for a long time. So today we're quite excited to hear her story. She's got a story that she wants to share with us. But also the theme today is the importance of doing a review with your client. You know, I cannot emphasize that anymore. You know, you enter a journey with a client. You sit and you have a lot of discussions with your client. And you might implement some of those plans, those ideas. And like any plan, it needs to be looked at, it needs to be reviewed. And we just find in the insurance business that something that's really lacking is the review of a financial plan. And Pearl's really looked at this, and she's implemented the review system with all her clients. And I think a story today just emphasizes the importance of doing a review. So, welcome, Pearl. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon to Vernon and the King and the King of Kingfisher, Ethan, and to all the listeners. Thank you for helping. Thank you for having me on. Not helping me, but having me on. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story with you. I would like to share a story with you about the need for proper planning and the value that a client can gain from having a good financial planner in their corner. Now, if your car broke down, Ethan, you take it to a professional mechanic, am I right?
Yep.
You wouldn't go to
Vernon.
A clothing store to get your car fixed.
Correct.
If you are ill, you'd go to the doctor, right, Mr. DeVos?
Yep.
Yep. So if you need legal advice, you go to an attorney, and that's just how it works. Because why? They are professional in what they do. A good financial planner will help you to plan when major life event happens and disaster strikes your family, so that you are adequately prepared financially. Now, Ethan, I had an appointment to do an annual review. And my client has been a client of mine for a very, very long time. And in this particular instance, I phoned her and I asked her, I said, can I come and do a review with you? She agreed, and we set up an appointment. Sitting in a home, I noticed 3 kids running in and out of a house. And this is the first time, Ethan, I've ever been to our home. So whenever I went to go see it, I was at our work. So I noticed these 3 kids running around in and out of our house, laughing and playing. It took me back to my carefree days when I was a kid, with no worries or responsibilities. And enjoying the kids' joyful faces around me, it suddenly struck me, where's their mom? You know? I asked my client, and she explained to me that they were grandchildren. Their mom was around, but out visiting. The first question I asked her was, is their mom working? And my client said, no. The second question I asked was, who was taking care of them? And my client said that she assisted in looking after them. Thirdly, I asked my client, who will look after the kids if something was to happen to their mom? She said that she would. Then I thought to myself, I have to give her advice on this. And my advice to her was simply, if she's going to be the sole a person taking responsibility for her grandkids, when the mother passes on, she would need financial help. Do you agree, Ethan?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, taking on 3 kids is a lot of money. One is a lot already, but 3 is much more. So just food for some thought. How many grandparents are out there that are taking care of their grandkids after their mom or dad has passed on? Can you imagine the financial burden on that poor grandmother?
Yeah.
I'm also sure that the single moms out there should consider the fact that they should pass on who would be financially responsible for their children, you know. I then proceeded to do a financial analysis, checking what their month-to-month expenses were for the kids. Then we proceeded to do an analysis of the education costs that they would need after matric and what the cost would be. There was a massive shortfall. I then said to my client, let's take out life cover on your daughter. If anything happened to your daughter, at least she would have enough money to look after the kids and have enough money for the education if they matriculated. My client immediately saw the need and acted. We were able to apply for life cover for her daughter, and fortunately the insurer approved her application. She was happy, and I felt good knowing that a future and a grandchildren's future was covered. Ethan, 6 years later, tragedy struck the family. Her daughter was involved in a car accident.
Yeah, Paul, just 1 second.
Hi,
I think we're going to go to a break now, and then after the break you can continue with the story.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks, Ethan. Thank you.
Talking to Risk-Free Solutions with Pearl today, talking about the importance of a financial review, and following on that story.
Real, relevant radio. Kingfisher FM. PE's #1 Christian contemporary station. Kingfisher FM.
It's Risk-Free Solutions in studio and online all the way from Kimberley. It's Pearl talking a little bit about the value and importance of having a review annually.
Correct.
Yes.
Pearl, you're going to continue with your story?
Yes, I'll do that. Okay, 6 years later, tragedy struck the family. Her daughter was involved in a car accident, and the impact was so bad that the daughter died instantly. She was the tire. She had a tire burst, and the driver was driving at a high speed. What the result is, she was thrown out of the car, so she died instantly.
Terrible.
It was very sad, died Ethan, and her children were devastated. We submitted a claim, and within 3 weeks, her cover amount was paid to her. Fortunately, the funeral cover was paid out within 48 hours, and they could give her a dignified funeral. The grief was devastating for her, but at least she did not have a financial burden of worrying about financial well-being for her grandchildren, because now the life cover had sorted her month-to-month expenses out, as well as she had enough money for when they matriculated to pay for extramural, to pay for like university fees or college fees. So there was enough money set aside for the month-to-month expenses. The family grieved, but realized that the valuable impact that good advice can have, and also the importance of having a good financial planner on your side, is so important. The power of good advice ensured our grandchildren had a future now. My eyes started tearing, Ethan, after I realized that our grandchildren were going to be okay financially. My friends listening to me today, contact the financial planner. Let them look at your portfolio so that if disaster strikes your family, you'll be okay. You'll be taken care of financially. Make sure that you and your family are covered. There is a process to follow, Ethan, when doing estate planning, and I will hand over to Vernon de Vos, who will talk about that for us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vernon.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And that's a very sad story, but again, it just shows the value of good advice, and also, doing that review, building the relationship with your client, and then going back and just having a chat. And like you said, you went to a home, which you normally never did, and because of that, you were able to discuss maybe a bit more than what you thought. And because of that,
because I was telling Vernon earlier on, Ethan, when you buy a client, and even if you have the opportunity to go to the client's house, if you sit in the client's house, There's such a lot of things. If you can look around the house, they can tell you a story. The client doesn't have to talk to you, you know. Just by me sitting and observing the kids in and out, you know, the photos of the kids around in the house.
Yeah, because then you will know,
yeah.
kind of like having a consultation these days with a doctor virtually. I know that this is now a reality for us, but what can a doctor sort of diagnose over the phone versus in person?
Exactly.
Yeah,
If he doesn't feel or he doesn't, you know, put his do his different
Checks.
Checks. Yeah.
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 Yeah, but also I think maybe with the listeners out there, you know, one of the things, and we're talking specifically about if somebody should pass away, you know, what should happen. And one of the things that we do as financial planners, we look at certain aspects of the financial planning process, and we follow certain steps. So one of the steps that we do with all our clients, the first thing we have to find out is how they are married. So if you obviously if you're not married, it's an irrelevant question. But if you are married, are you married in community of property? Are you married out of community of property but with accrual, or just out of community of property with no accrual?
Why is that important?
That's very important, because when it comes to the estate, if there is accrual, there is a claim. And as you know, the bigger person within the estate, the bigger married couple within the estate has to pay the other married couple out in the event of death. So that's very important, because if planning is not taken care of for that estate could end up in trouble or being insolvent.
And and I would imagine if they're married in community, that also holds certain legal ramifications.
Correct. So as you know, if you're married in community of property, half of what you own belongs to your spouse and the other half belongs to the other person.
Whether it's debts or whether it's assets.
Whether it's assets or whether it's debt, 100%. So that's the first thing we need to do when we do the financial planning process. Step one, if it's a married couple, find out how they are married. If they are married with accrual, then you obviously need to look a bit deeper in what each couple brought into the marriage from that marriage date, and then what assets were accumulated during that period. And obviously the person with the bigger estate, that gets divided into two, and then that forms part of the claim for the other person. So that's the first thing. Look at what the marriage regime is. If there is an accrual calculation, do the accrual calculation. That's step one. Step two is then to look at capital gains tax, especially if there is other properties. Maybe you have your residential property, and you and call it the profit of your residential property has a limit of 2 million. Everything over and above 2 million, you start to pay capital gains tax. A lot of people don't realize that. If you've got other assets that attract capital gain and that person should pass away, that estate would then have to pay capital gains tax. And if you're not aware of it, your estate could end up with a lot of problems, big debt within the estate. So number one, find out. Step number one, do the how is the couple married? Do the accrual calculation. Step two is look at capital gains tax and the implications of capital gain on the estate. Number three is there's obviously certain expenses linked to an estate. We spoke about it the last time on Mario's show. There's the master's fees, there is funeral costs, there's executors' fees. Do that calculation. Find out exactly what that estate will have to pay. What are the administrative costs within that estate? Number four, we talk about the residue of the estate. So the residue of your estate, if you're married in community of property, or if you're married, a lot of times you'll nominate your spouse to receive the residue of the estate. So in legal terms, that's what we call a Section 4Q. So that does not attract estate duty. So if
you're telling people a lot of information over here,
but
what I want to get at, I think, or what people can take away from it, I think, is the fact that so often people come from the wrong approach.
Yeah.
I need a policy for funeral.
Correct.
Or I need a life cover for my bond.
Correct.
And then they take out something to cover that.
Correct.
As opposed to saying, what is the big picture here?
Correct.
Yes.
And
yes.
looking at everything in context and saying, if this happens, what plans do we have in place? Are we adequately covered for this?
Correct.
If I die, do I have a will? If I, where can I save? How much must I? So the whole bang shoot of the family plan,
Correct.
as opposed to sort of cherry picking things as they sort of pop up.
Correct.
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
No, 100% correct.
Yes.
So the issue is, when you have a need, you need to be able to quantify the need. So if somebody comes to us and they say, listen, I need cover, the question is, okay, how much cover do you need? Well, my bond is X amount, maybe I need to cover my bond, but it's actually not as simple as that. You actually need to go through this process, which I'm explaining, and it's really to come up with a figure that looks at your needs and quantifies your needs, and that's effectively the exercise. And as Pearl's mentioned, the importance of doing the review, because you might have bought another property, you might have bought another car, you might have bought a more expensive car.
Your child might have left the house, you might have got sick, you might have lost your job.
There's so much things happening, and if you're not reviewing your plan and making sure you're up to date with it, you could end up thinking I'm okay, and when something does happen, realize you're not okay.
Yeah,
and I mean, with Pearl's scenario, in her doing the review and being at the client's home, she noticed the kids, and she wasn't aware of that.
You see, the client doesn't even know to ask those questions.
Not at all. It's in the probing, it's in the asking of the questions, because the review process allows us to do that.
Because otherwise you get to a scenario where somebody, for example, says, you never told me,
Yes.
that I can't get that money now.
100%. 100%.
And then you'd be like, because you didn't, for example, have a beneficiary on there.
Correct.
Or that's the rules of retirement. You can't get all that money, or whatever the rules are for whatever the event is.
Correct. 100% correct.
And Ethan, it's shocking to see when I do reviews, and not only on my own clients, when I approach a new client, I first ask them if I can check the policies that they've got after doing the analysis. And you will be shocked to see that this person's just got funeral covers. And, you ask the question, but how, if you're paying 4,000 Rand for funeral covers, what have you got for your wife and your kids? You realize that if you die, the 4,000 has gone down the drain. and a lot of people just don't realize. They just take out funeral covers.
Yeah. And again, I think that's the point of the show, is really to get the listeners to think about this aspect of our lives. It's an aspect that we don't like to talk about, but it's an aspect of our lives that we need to look at. Maybe just going through those steps that I spoke about. Looking at the capital gains implication on the estate, looking at the accrual implication on the estate, looking at the residue of the estate, in other words, what will be left to the person that you're leaving the residue of your estate to, very important. And also with leaving the residue of the estate, we know to escape estate duty, if you leave everything to your spouse, that section 4Q kicks in, so that actually helps with that estate being empty, so that doesn't attract estate duty. But that's important, because that's the other aspect that you look at. You go through these steps to establish if that estate is big enough, and if it is big enough, there's going to be what we call death taxes or estate duty. There's going to be taxes that estate will have to pay. And again, if you're not aware of it, you need to be aware of it. And if you've got a lot of property and you have a lot of assets, you have to be aware of the estate duty payable in the event of your death. And also, if you are aware of it, maybe you can do some planning now to make sure that you put the necessary in place to be able to deal with what needs to be dealt with. And then the last thing is to see if your estate is solvent or not, because a lot of estates end up being insolvent. So in other words, the amount of debt within that estate versus the deemed property. When I say deemed property, I'm talking about the cash, the life covers that can immediately be converted into cash to be able to cover that estate is not sufficient. So that's the process that we take our clients, and every client should go through that process to see exactly what his or her situation would be like. And like I say, there's a lot of things involved in that process. It's not a quick process. So in the review process, you actually have to take your time. You actually have to ask the necessary questions. And in my experience,
it's almost like, if I can equate it to a doctor, it's a full medical.
It's a full medical, 100%.
Full medical, yeah.
As opposed to going into the doc and say, Doc, write me a script, I have a headache.
100%. 100%.
I think also, if I can take away from it, is just to realize, obviously, it's an ongoing discussion with someone who has got your best interests at heart.
Yes, and I think that's what Paul said. You know, it's to have a good financial planner in your corner is so important. It's actually vital. And it's one of those things that one always postpones. You always put it off. You know, there's things that you have to do, but you know what? I'll do it at a later stage. And I mean, I'm honest. Even within my own life, and I do this as a living. You know, there's some things that I need to do, and I keep saying to myself, I better get on to doing certain stuff, and I just postpone it. But again, it's just so important to get the necessary sorted. It's so important to do that. But the importance of a financial plan, the importance of the review, Ethan, for me is very important.
I think we're going to leave it there. It's lots of information, but if you want to get a copy of this, we will make it available. Also, we will be rebroadcasting it. And if you want to also connect with Vernon and his team, a big thank you to Pearl in Kimberley. You don't have to call Kimberley, but
thank you for
Pearl,
having me.
Thank you for being the lady on the show and just sharing a positive story.
Yeah,
with us.
maybe, Ethan, believe it or not, there's a lot of Kimberley people that listen to Kingfisher FM because of the live streaming. So
wonderful. And again, if you need some advice, contact Risk Free Solutions. Just pop online, type in Risk Free Solutions. Vernon de Vos and his team, happy to help. Vernon, thank you for your time. Pearl, thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Have a good day. Thank you,
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Your Financial Journey, where planning matters. Brought to you by Risk Free Solutions, an accredited Old Mutual Agency franchise. Tune in weekly to the show that leads the way so that no one gets left behind. Every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. right here on 107.5 FM.
Hope Radio, Kingfisher FM.